close your eyes and listen to the sea. Imagine a horizon that glows softly beneath a silver moon, where the waves whisper secrets older than the stars. Somewhere beyond the edge of memory lies a city that once shimmered like crystal under the sun. A place born not of stone or sand, but of philosophy and longing. Tonight, we will drift backward through time, following the faint echo of its name. Atlantis, a dream that refused to drown, a mirror of all that humanity was, and all it still hopes to be. Let the story begin. The night was quiet except for the slow breathing of the ocean. Its rhythm was steady, ancient, as if the sea itself remembered what humankind had long forgotten. I sat by the shore, watching the moon trace silver across the water. And I wondered if waves could speak. What stories would they tell? Perhaps they would whisper of cities lost beneath the tide of voices swallowed by time. Perhaps they would tell me about Atlantis. But the story of Atlantis, contrary to what many imagine, does not begin beneath the sea. It begins in the golden age of Athens around 360 years before Christ. In the marble courtyards of the academy where olive trees rustled like gentle prayer, a philosopher named Plato sat beneath the sun and gave birth to a legend that would outlive empires. He did not dive into the ocean to find it. He built it out of thought, word by word, like a cathedral made of reason and myth. There, among the scrolls and dust and echoing columns, he wrote two dialogues, Timaeus and Critias. In them, a man named Critias speaks of an island so vast and powerful, it rivaled the gods themselves. Yet Plato did not write as a historian. He wrote as a dreamer and a teacher. Atlantis to him was not geography but morality, a mirror reflecting the dangers of human pride. He tells us that Solon, the great lawgiver of Athens, once journeyed to Egypt. There, among the temples of Sais, the priests told him of an empire that had existed 9,000 years before their time. A civilization born from divine lineage, sons of Poseidon, who ruled an island beyond the Pillars of Hercules, beyond the strait we now call Gibraltar. They were strong, brilliant, and rich beyond measure. But as the generations passed, their hearts grew cold, and their faith dimmed. They no longer sought the gods. They sought only themselves. Plato describes a land of wonder, concentric rings of land and water, glittering canals, and golden temples, harbors filled with ships, and palaces crowned with orichalcum, the mysterious metal said to glow with its own light. The capital city was a masterpiece of symmetry and order, a place where architecture followed harmony, and every road seemed to sing the song of balance. Yet even here, beneath the golden walls and the shining towers, something unseen began to stir, a tremor of pride, a shadow of desire. For every empire, no matter how radiant, hides the seed of its undoing. In Timaeus, Plato tells of how Athens, virtuous, disciplined, and pure, once stood against the mighty power of Atlantis. The Athenians, guided by wisdom, defeated the proud island nation. And when Atlantis fell into arrogance and forgot the gods, the earth trembled. The sea rose. In a single day and night, the island was swallowed whole by the waves. Plato ends the tale not with certainty, but with silence. Critias breaks off mid-sentence, as if even the philosopher himself could not finish it. Or perhaps he wanted the silence to speak a pause, echoing through time, urging humanity to reflect on its own fate. Was Atlantis real? Or was it a parable, a warning written in marble and memory? For over 2,000 years, thinkers and wanderers have stood where I sit now, listening to the sea and wondering if the waves conceal the ruins of that lost perfection. Sometimes when the night deepens and the world grows still, I imagine Plato standing here beside me, his robe brushing the sand. I imagine him looking out at the horizon, his eyes soft with thought. Maybe he would smile and say, "You see, the story was never about a place. It was about us." Because every civilization carries within it a reflection of Atlantis. The same longing for greatness, the same temptation of pride, the same fragile thread between creation and collapse. The waves roll on as they always have, smoothing the shore, erasing the footsteps of those who came before. The air smells of salt and remembrance. Somewhere in the deep, something ancient stirs, not stone, not city, but memory. As I close my eyes, I can almost hear the echo of a voice carried on the tide. Remember what was lost, and guard what still remains. And so begins our journey, not to find a place that sank, but to awaken the dream that still drifts within the human heart. If you feel the pull of that dream too, stay a while. Let the sea guide you through time. And when the night feels long and the waves seem to whisper your name, remember, there are more stories waiting, gentle as the tide, eternal as the stars. Before you drift into sleep, don't forget to subscribe to Gentle Sleep Stories, where every night another ancient voice rises softly from the ocean of memory. The sea did not sleep that night. Long after the stars dimmed and the moon drifted west, its slow rhythm kept whispering the same name, Atlantis. I dreamed of it not as ruins beneath the waves, but as light shimmering through thought itself. When I awoke, I felt as though the story had not ended with Plato's unfinished sentence. It had only paused, waiting for breath, waiting for us to continue it. At dawn, the world seemed carved from quiet gold. The sea lay smooth and glass-like, as if it too were reflecting on the dream of Atlantis. I thought of Plato seated beneath the same sun more than 2 millennia ago, a stylus in hand, his mind drifting between earth and heaven. He was not merely recording a legend, he was sculpting a mirror of the human soul. Plato's Atlantis was never meant to rest in the pages of a map. It lived instead in the architecture of morality and imagination. Through the dialogues Timaeus and Critias, he built an empire not of stone, but of ideas. His pen became a chisel shaping the contours of a civilization whose brilliance and fall would echo through all of history. He describes the island with the precision of an artist who has seen it in a vision. Beyond the Pillars of Hercules, where the known world ended and mystery began, lay a continent greater than Libya and Asia combined. It was rich in metals, forests, and fields that bore 2 harvests each year. Around its central city, canals gleamed like ribbons of silver, joining rings of land and sea in a perfect pattern of symmetry, as if geometry itself had become divine. At the heart of this grand design stood the Temple of Poseidon, built of silver and gold, its towers rising like sunlight frozen in form. Inside, a statue of the god drove 6 winged horses forever galloping across eternity. Around him stood the 10 kings of Atlantis, each the descendant of Poseidon's first son, Atlas. They were noble and just, bound by sacred laws, inscribed upon an orichalcum pillar, that mysterious radiant metal second only to gold. And yet in every gleaming surface there was already a reflection of decay. Plato's words move softly from admiration to sorrow. In their beginning, he tells us the Atlanteans were virtuous, their hearts guided by divine wisdom. They ruled with balance, blending strength with compassion. But over time, as the divine spark within them faded, and the mortal part grew stronger, they forgot the harmony that had once made them whole. They grew restless, hungry for power, drunk on abundance. What began as grace became greed. What had been wisdom turned into will. And so the shining city began to sink not into water, but into pride. In the dialogue, Plato sets Atlantis against ancient Athens, a city of reason, moderation, and courage. Athens stood as the mirror opposite of Atlantis, simple, where the island was grand, spiritual, where it was material. When Atlantis sought to conquer the world, Athens rose to defend it, pure in its virtue, and guided by divine order. And in the end, the gods themselves judged Atlantis. In a single day and night of misfortune, the sea swallowed it whole. The philosopher's story fades there mid-sentence, mid-breath. The dialogue breaks, as if a wave had swept across the parchment itself. Was it deliberate? Did Plato leave it unfinished to remind us that moral reflection never truly ends? That every age must write its own conclusion? When I imagine him writing, I see not a man of certainty, but of longing. Plato had watched Athens decline after its golden age, watched pride corrode wisdom, just as it had in his tale. The fall of Atlantis was in truth the fall of man again and again across the ages. And yet there is beauty in his sorrow. He was not condemning humanity, only reminding it to remember. To remember what happens when power forgets virtue, when knowledge forgets humility. His island was a metaphor made of sea foam and warning, a reflection shimmering on the edge of our conscience. Some say he invented the whole story as a moral exercise. Others believe he recorded fragments of a memory too old for history. But perhaps the truth lies somewhere in between, as it often does in dreams. Atlantis might have been both a lost civilization and a timeless lesson, a vision sent not from the ocean floor, but from the depths of the human mind. When I close my eyes, I see it again. The concentric rings of water, the ships gliding through silent harbors, the sound of hammers echoing through marble corridors. But I also see something more, the stillness before the fall. The quiet heartbeat of a people who had everything and knew not what to do with it. Perhaps that is why Plato's tale never truly ends. Because Atlantis is not a story about the past. It is about the endless now, the moment before pride becomes ruin, before light collapses into shadow. Every time a civilization rises too high, the tide stirs once more. The morning light rippled across the sea as I thought of this. The waves rolled gently like breath on the skin of the world. I realized that Plato's unfinished sentence was still being written not by ink, but by time itself. We are the continuation of his dialogue, living proof that the question remains, can humanity hold its virtue amid its power? The answer drifts like a shell in the surf, waiting to be found. So I sat by the shore, letting the salt wind move through my hair, and I listened to the ocean repeat its gentle vow. Nothing truly vanishes. Not stories, not wisdom, not even lost cities. They wait somewhere beyond sight until we are quiet enough to hear them again. If you've stayed with me this far, let your heart rest now. The sea has more to tell, and its voice grows softer as the night deepens. Close your eyes, let the story breathe beside you, and if you wish to continue sailing through the timeless waves of forgotten wonders, don't forget to subscribe to Gentle Sleep Stories, where every legend drifts like a lullaby waiting to carry you peacefully into dreams. The sea, it seems, remembers even what men forget. Long after Plato's ink had dried, and the centuries began to turn, his story did not fade. It drifted from one mind to another, like a candle passed from hand to trembling hand. The light never went out, it only changed its keeper. As dawn shimmered again on the quiet water, I realized that the dream of Atlantis had not died with its philosopher. It had begun to live a new life in those who dared to listen. It is said that ideas have tides, that they rise and fall like the sea that inspired them. Plato's tale of Atlantis was one such tide. It began in whispers, first among the students of the academy, then among poets, travelers, and priests. And soon, like a slow-moving current, it reached every corner of the ancient world. Athens by then was already changing. The great city of philosophers and sculptors was growing quieter, its marble temples collecting dust. Yet in the hush of decline, the story of Atlantis breathed like a sleeping ember. Some dismissed it as fable, others guarded it as truth. But no one could escape its pull. In the port of Piraeus, sailors told of strange islands that vanished in storms. In the libraries of Alexandria, scholars traced maps of unknown continents across the sea. In the temples of Egypt, priests nodded silently, as though the tale was not new to them at all. It was as if the memory of Atlantis had always been there, waiting for Plato to give it a name. Still, not everyone was enchanted. Among the first to question was Aristotle, Plato's most brilliant student, the sharp mind who believed more in logic than in wonder. He looked at his teacher's story and said quietly, "He who dreamed it up made it disappear." His words, though simple, carried the cool finality of reason. To Aristotle, Atlantis was not a lost kingdom. It was an allegory, a myth wrapped in moral lesson. And perhaps he was right. For what is more dangerous than the blending of truth and dream? Yet even as he tried to close the book on Atlantis, the idea refused to stay buried. Across generations, others picked up the thread. Crantor, one of Plato's successors, swore he had seen evidence in Egyptian temples, old inscriptions that confirmed the story's truth. Whether real or imagined, it reignited the debate: was Atlantis a moral mirror or a forgotten memory? The question lingered through centuries, echoing like a soft chant beneath the world's clamor. Historians searched scrolls, geographers drew maps, and poets spoke of islands swallowed by divine wrath. Even when the evidence was thin as mist, faith filled the gaps. Humans, after all, have always believed not only in what they can see, but in what they long for. As I sat by the sea that morning, I could almost hear their voices, the scholars in their robes arguing by lamplight, the travelers drawing the ocean's edge in sand. Atlantis, they would say, was not merely a place, but a warning. And yet their eyes, despite their caution, always shone with a glimmer of hope. The hope that perhaps the story was more than metaphor, that somewhere beneath the horizon, the island still slept. I imagine the people of ancient Athens listening as the tale was read aloud in the open air. The sound of it must have been like music, solemn and beautiful, filled with the weight of forgotten ages. Some would have felt pride, believing their ancestors had once stood as heroes against a mighty empire. Others would have felt a strange sadness, a yearning for what was lost before they were even born. For in Atlantis, every soul could see a reflection of its own desire to rise, to build, to fall, and to be remembered. Through the centuries, the story became a vessel for meaning. Philosophers used it to teach, priests to warn, and poets to dream. In each retelling, Atlantis changed shape, sometimes a paradise, sometimes a caution, sometimes a mirror held up to the vanity of kings. And though its details shifted like the sands of the shore, its essence endured, that civilizations like waves can glitter for a moment before returning to the sea. Perhaps that is why the story endured so long, because it was never only about them, but about us. Every generation that heard of Atlantis recognized a part of itself in its rise and ruin. It was as if humanity, looking into the waters of its own reflection, saw not just the present, but every glory and every folly that had ever been. The centuries passed, empires fell, and libraries burned. Yet the whisper of Atlantis survived the fires. It lived in fragments, in translations, in quiet recollections, scribbled in the margins of forgotten books. It slept, but never died. When I think of it now, I realize that stories like Atlantis are not sustained by proof, but by longing. The need to believe that somewhere, sometime, humanity reached perfection, even if it destroyed itself in the end, is a need older than language itself. As the sun climbed higher, I watched its reflection ripple over the waves. The water looked like 1,000 fragments of light, each one glimmering for a heartbeat before breaking apart. That, I thought, is how ideas live in pieces, scattered, reborn with every mind that dares to dream. And maybe Plato knew this when he left his story unfinished. Maybe he trusted time itself to continue the writing, to let others, philosophers, wanderers, believers, add their own verses. The legend, after all, belongs not to the past, but to the rhythm of the world repeating itself with every rise and fall of the tide. So when the evening came and the last rays of daylight stretched across the horizon, I closed my eyes and listened again to the ocean's quiet breathing. It no longer felt like mere water, but like thought made liquid, flowing through the ages. Somewhere beneath its surface, I imagined the pulse of a city that once was, and perhaps still is, in the imagination of mankind. Tomorrow the journey will carry us deeper into time, into the centuries when the story of Atlantis nearly vanished, only to be found again by candlelight, in monasteries and scholars' hands. But for now, let us stay here by the shore, where the ancient and the present meet in peace. The sea is calm tonight. Let its voice be your lullaby. The sea carried the voices of philosophers long after their marble cities had turned to dust. Their debates faded into murmurs. Their libraries crumbled into silence. Yet the story of Atlantis drifted onward, softer, now gentler, like a lullaby sung by memory itself. As the centuries passed, the waves no longer whispered in Greek, but in Latin, then in prayer. The dream of the lost island slipped quietly into the long sleep of the Middle Ages, where it would rest beneath candlelight and scripture until the world was ready to remember again. There are moments in history when the world seems to hold its breath, when knowledge sleeps, and the light of curiosity dims behind thick monastery walls. Such was the fate of Atlantis after the fall of Rome. The story that once traveled on the tongues of poets and scholars sank beneath the slow tide of time. It did not vanish, but drifted into the shadows like a melody too faint to hear, yet impossible to forget. In those quiet centuries, the world changed its rhythm. The marble columns of Athens had fallen, the libraries of Alexandria had burned, and the wisdom of the ancients was buried under the weight of war, faith, and forgetting. Europe grew darker and smaller. Its eyes turned inward toward heaven. The monks who guarded the remnants of knowledge copied sacred texts by trembling candlelight, their ink-stained hands recording prayers, psalms, and the gospels of redemption. The words of Plato were not forbidden, merely forgotten, waiting patiently for the world to dream once more. Imagine one of those monks, perhaps an old man with weary eyes, sitting alone at his desk, while the winter wind howls outside the stone abbey. Before him lies a single fragile parchment, a faded Latin translation of Timaeus. He traces the letters with his fingers, reading of an island lost to the sea. For a moment, his heart stirs. He pictures vast canals, shining temples, a civilization swallowed by pride and water. But then the bells ring, and the world calls him back to prayer. The page is closed, the dream folded away like a leaf pressed between the pages of eternity. For nearly 1,000 years, the West forgot the full story of Atlantis. Only fragments survived, a few lines quoted by early Christian scholars who saw in it a warning about divine justice. To them, the island's destruction mirrored the flood of Noah, a reminder that pride before God brings ruin. The philosophers had spoken of ethics. The priests spoke of sin. Atlantis changed shape in their hands, no longer the allegory of reason and virtue, but a shadowed echo of biblical punishment. Yet even in that age of faith, the silence was never complete. In Byzantium, far to the east, Greek scholars still guarded the old language and the texts of the ancients. Within their libraries, wrapped in dust and devotion, Plato's words endured. The world was not ready to listen, but the story waited patient as the tide. It is strange to think how fragile memory can be, how entire civilizations can forget their own dreams. But forgetting is not the same as erasure. The story of Atlantis had simply gone to sleep, like a seed buried deep beneath the soil, waiting for the warmth of a new dawn. And that dawn would come centuries later, when Europe's long winter began to thaw. But for now, in the quiet of the medieval night, the story drifted through the dreams of scribes, pilgrims, and mystics. Some said they saw visions of cities beneath the waves. Others spoke of a golden land beyond the horizon where souls rested before judgment. They did not know it, but they were hearing the faint heartbeat of Atlantis once again. There is beauty too in forgetting, for silence allows old stories to take root in new soil. While scholars argued about angels and saints, the idea of a lost world began to blend with legends of paradise, the isles of the blessed Avalon or high Brazil, faraway places glimpsed by sailors through mist. Perhaps without knowing it, the Middle Ages kept Atlantis alive in their myths of heaven's reflection upon the sea. Sometimes I like to imagine the night watchman of a monastery standing at the top of a bell tower. Below him, the courtyard is cloaked in fog. Above him the stars shimmer like eyes that have never closed. He listens to the ocean wind sweeping over the hills, carrying with it the eternal hum of waves. And though he has never read Plato, he feels the same pull, the longing for a world both lost and remembered. The monks prayed through the centuries, and the world kept turning. Knowledge slept, but did not die. Beneath the steady rhythm of faith, reason waited to rise again. The river of forgetfulness, that quiet current that carries human memory toward oblivion, never reached the ocean. Somewhere deep within its waters, Atlantis remained intact, glimmering faintly beneath the darkness. History would awaken soon. Travelers would cross mountains and deserts searching for old manuscripts. Artists would rediscover proportion, and thinkers would dream once more of balance and beauty. The ancient philosophers would be called back into the light, their voices trembling with age, but still full of truth. And when that time came, when the Renaissance dawned and the world opened its eyes again, the story of Atlantis would return not as myth, but as memory reborn. But before that golden awakening, the world needed silence. The centuries of prayer and shadow were not wasted. They were the long inhale before the breath of rediscovery, the night before the sunrise of thought. Outside, the waves continue their soft chanting against the cliffs. Their sound is neither old nor new. It is the same rhythm that lulled Plato to wonder, the same rhythm that whispered to monks in their stone cells, the same rhythm that hums in our hearts tonight as we listen. Perhaps in every age, Atlantis survives in those who still dare to imagine, who keep the candle burning, even in the darkest corridors of time. And as the sea sighs once more, the stars gleam faintly above, and history prepares to wake, we will soon find ourselves in Florence, the city where forgotten wisdom was reborn in light, the place where Atlantis would rise again, not from the ocean, but from the pages of human memory. Now rest for a moment, dear listener. The monks are asleep. The candles have burned low. The story, like the tide, will return. The long night of silence was ending. From the monasteries where candles once trembled beside forgotten scrolls, a soft wind began to stir, the wind of curiosity, of awakening. The world was stretching after centuries of sleep, blinking in the dawn of rediscovery. Somewhere in Florence, under frescoed ceilings, and the sound of quills scratching parchment, a voice from the ancient past was about to speak again. And through that voice, the lost island would rise, not from the depths of the ocean, but from the depths of the human mind. Florence in the 15th century was not merely a city. It was a heartbeat. The air itself seemed alive with light and wonder. Bells rang from high towers, artisans carved marble into angels, and painters trapped eternity in color. After centuries of darkness, knowledge was being reborn, not timidly, but in a blaze. The Renaissance had arrived, and with it the long slumbering dreams of the ancient world stirred once more. Among those dreams was Atlantis. It happened quietly at first. A philosopher and translator named Marsilio Ficino sat beneath the vaulted ceilings of a Florentine villa, surrounded by stacks of old Greek manuscripts. His candle burned low, illuminating the worn pages of Plato's dialogues Timaeus and Critias. For nearly 1,000 years, no one in Europe had read these words in their entirety. Now, at last, they breathed again through Ficino's careful translation into Latin. When he finished his work in 1484, The story of Atlantis, forgotten by time, buried beneath prayer and dust, was reborn. The scholars of Florence gathered to read it aloud. Imagine their faces in the golden candlelight, their eyes widening as the words unfolded the vast island beyond the pillars of Hercules, the mighty temples of Poseidon, the gleaming walls of Orichalcum. But most of all, they heard Plato's warning, his lament for the moral decline of a civilization too proud of its own greatness. To those men of the Renaissance, the story felt strangely familiar. They saw in Atlantis not just myth, but a mirror. Europe, too, had known darkness and decay. Now it stood at the threshold of renewal, uncertain whether it would rise into wisdom or sink again into arrogance. Ficino, steeped in both Christianity and philosophy, saw no contradiction in Plato's vision. To him, Atlantis symbolized divine truth, hidden beneath the tides of time. He wrote of the unity between ancient wisdom and Christian revelation, believing both sprang from the same eternal source. In his mind, Atlantis was not merely a lost city. It was a symbol of the human soul, fallen and redeemable. And how that idea glowed in the hearts of the thinkers around him. The Medici court, ever hungry for beauty and knowledge, embraced it with wonder. Artists began to imagine Atlantis not as ruin, but as radiant perfection. Golden domes, crystal waters, harmonious proportions that reflected the divine order of the cosmos. It became for a time less a warning and more a longing, an image of paradise before the fall. Yet within that longing something profound stirred. The men of Florence understood that Atlantis was also about memory, the way civilizations rise and forget, and rise again. In their revival of art and philosophy, they saw themselves as builders upon old foundations, reclaiming a wisdom drowned but not destroyed. The printing press, a miracle of its own age, spread Ficino's translation across Europe. The story flowed like sunlight through the corridors of learning, from Florence to Paris, from London to Prague. Scholars debated whether the tale was allegory or history. Explorers whispered that perhaps Plato's lost island still lay somewhere in the western seas. And then, as if destiny were listening, the horizon widened. In 1492, just 8 years after Ficino's translation, Columbus set sail from Spain. His ships slipped past the very pillars Plato had described. The sailors who watched the land disappear behind them could not have known that they were sailing straight into a legend. The old story of Atlantis, once confined to parchment, now seemed to rise on the waves themselves. When the New World was discovered, many believed it to be the ancient island reborn. The temples of the Aztecs, the canals of the Maya, the grandeur of Incan cities, all these seem to echo Plato's descriptions. How else could such splendor exist across the sea, if not as the remnants of a forgotten empire? The Renaissance mind was fertile ground for wonder. It did not separate the mystical from the real. It saw the divine shimmering within the material. And so Atlantis, half dream and half philosophy, fit perfectly within this new world of rediscovered light. Sometimes I imagine the scholars of Florence standing by the Arno River at sunset. They speak of symmetry, of virtue, of lost ages. But perhaps when the evening grows quiet, they look toward the west and think of the waves. The same sun that gilds their city sinks each night into the very ocean where Plato said Atlantis fell. And as its golden rim disappears, maybe they wonder not as philosophers, but as dreamers, if the island still glows beneath that distant horizon. The Renaissance gave the world many gifts: art, science, freedom of thought. But it also gave it back its wonder. Atlantis was more than a myth revived. It was a reminder that human imagination is itself a form of resurrection. What had drowned in oblivion could rise again through words, through faith, through the stubborn hope of beauty. And so the story lived on, carried now not by monks or philosophers, but by explorers and visionaries who would soon test the edge of the world. The waves outside my window tonight sound almost like the pages of an old manuscript turning. They carry the same rhythm, ancient, persistent, alive. I think of Ficino's trembling hands as he finished his translation, and of the world awakening to its own forgotten light. Perhaps like him, we are all translators of memory, trying to give shape to what was lost, trying to listen through the centuries for the echo of wisdom beneath the roar of time. As the stars rise over Florence, their reflection trembles upon the Arno, like the faint outline of a city long submerged. The dream breathes again. The philosopher's words have crossed the ocean, and somewhere beyond the horizon the story waits for its next awakening. Close your eyes now. The night hums softly, and the wind carries the scent of ink and candle wax. Let the gentle rhythm of the river guide you into sleep, and when you wake, the story will have drifted onward toward the edge of the world, where discovery and memory meet. The golden light of Florence faded into the deep blue of the Atlantic. What began as a rebirth of thought in quiet libraries now found its reflection on the open sea. The Renaissance had not only revived the memory of Atlantis, it had awakened the hunger to find it. Men once content to dream now raised their sails toward the horizon, and as their ships vanished into the mist, the story that had slept for millennia began to breathe again, carried on the wind across an uncharted ocean. There is a kind of magic that happens when imagination meets discovery. The sailors who set out from Spain and Portugal at the turn of the 15th century did not know they were about to change the world. They chased maps drawn on rumor, driven by courage and fear in equal measure. Yet beneath their boldness was another dream, a whisper older than compass or crown. Somewhere beyond the horizon, it was said, lay the island of Atlantis. When Columbus crossed the ocean in 1492, his voyage carried more than a flag and a mission. It carried centuries of longing. In every creak of the ship's timbers, in every prayer murmured beneath the stars, the myth of Atlantis followed. The sailors did not yet know that they were approaching a vast new continent. To them, the West was still the realm of mystery, a sea that might hold the ruins of a godlike race. As the Santa Maria and her companions pressed through the endless waves, I like to imagine Columbus standing at the bow, his eyes fixed on the horizon. Perhaps he thought of Plato's words of the great island swallowed by the sea in a single day and night of misfortune. Perhaps he wondered if beyond this restless expanse that lost world might rise again. When land finally appeared, it was not a paradise of marble and orichalcum, but it shimmered with the same sense of wonder. The lush forests of the Caribbean, the golden light on the water, the intricate civilizations of the Aztecs and the Maya. These astonished the Europeans who beheld them. To many they seemed the living echoes of Plato's description, rich ordered, radiant with divine beauty. Could this, they asked, be Atlantis returned? The idea spread quickly. Scholars and priests wrote letters linking the new world to the old legend. They spoke of vast empires across the sea of canals and temples of rulers who claimed descent from the sun. Each discovery became a thread woven into the tapestry of a myth already centuries old. It did not matter that geography or history disagreed. What mattered was wonder. For the first time since Plato, the Western world felt that Atlantis might truly exist. In Spain, the royal court debated the meaning of these new lands. Were they proof of divine promise or evidence of ancient punishment? Some whispered that God had allowed Atlantis to rise again as a reward for human perseverance. Others warned that arrogance would once more invite its downfall. The echo of Plato's warning about virtue, lost in the intoxication of power, seemed to whisper across the ocean breeze. The explorers themselves became storytellers. They wrote of golden cities and shining lakes of pyramids that touched the clouds. Every river they crossed, every coastline they traced shimmered with possibility. They named places after paradise, after Eden, after lost worlds. Atlantis was no longer a memory. It had become a map. But history has a way of testing dreams. The same voyage that brought discovery also brought conquest. The civilizations the explorers encountered were not relics of a forgotten race, but vibrant nations of their own. Yet the myth of Atlantis lingered, shaping how Europe understood what it had found. The New World was viewed not as something entirely new, but as a rediscovered chapter of humanity's past, a mirror of the Old World's glories and its sins. Still, there was something poetic in the misunderstanding. The Renaissance mind, reborn to beauty and faith in human potential, saw Atlantis not as tragedy, but as destiny fulfilled. The ocean no longer divided mankind. It connected memory to possibility. The sailors had not found the ruins of a lost civilization, but in their courage to cross the unknown, they had lived out the very spirit of Atlantis, the pursuit of greatness balanced on the edge of ruin. I imagine those early nights on the open sea. The crew gathers on deck beneath a sky strewn with stars, brighter than any cathedral's gold. The ocean breathes beneath them, vast and dark. Its voice soft as the pages of an ancient book. Someone hums a hymn, someone else whispers a prayer. And far above the constellations draw invisible maps, the same ones the ancients had once read when they dreamed of lands beyond their sight. Perhaps that is the true meaning of Atlantis, not a place to be found, but a direction to follow. Every voyage, every act of discovery is a way of answering the question Plato left unfinished. It asks whether humanity, given knowledge and power, will build with humility or destroy through pride. And so each generation sails again, not only through oceans, but through the currents of its own conscience. By the time the great maps of the world were drawn, Atlantis had already shifted shape once more. It was no longer a lost island, but a symbol, a bridge between myth and reality, a dream that gave meaning to exploration. The poets of the 16th century wrote of it as both paradise and warning, the first civilization and the last illusion. And though the explorers did not find the shining temples of Poseidon beneath the waves, they found something far greater, the reflection of their own restless hearts. The longing that once drove Plato's pen now filled their sails. The story had come full circle, from philosophy to faith, from dream to voyage. As twilight settles upon the sea, I can almost hear the echoes of those ships, the creak of wood, the rustle of sails, the faint murmur of men who believed they were chasing a legend, but were in truth chasing themselves. The waves that once swallowed Atlantis now bore the vessels of a new world, as if the ocean itself had forgiven mankind and offered it another beginning. The stars above shimmer softly, eternal witnesses to humanity's longing. Perhaps somewhere in that expanse, the spirit of Atlantis smiles not as a ruin, but as a light guiding those who still dare to dream beyond the edge of the map. And when you close your eyes tonight, listen closely. You might hear it too, the sound of the wind in the rigging, the hush of the sea, and the eternal whisper of discovery calling your name as gently as sleep. As the sails of discovery billowed across the Atlantic, the dream of Atlantis spread once more, no longer confined to the Mediterranean mind, but whispered in every harbor and court of Europe. The world had expanded, and with it the longing for origins deepened. Yet the more men explored, the less certain they became of where paradise might lie. When no trace of the lost island appeared among the waves, imagination turned inward again, searching not the ocean, but the soul. In that silence between discovery and doubt, a new generation of dreamers began to wonder if Atlantis had not been found. Perhaps it was never lost. The 17th century dawned with restless curiosity. The great voyages had mapped nearly every coastline known to man, yet the hunger to explain Atlantis remained unfulfilled. The maps of the world were becoming clearer, but the heart of the legend grew more mysterious. If the new world was not Atlantis, then where had that radiant island gone? Scholars, poets, and mystics searched for it not with ships, but with theories, each one more daring than the last. Among the most passionate was Olaus Rudbeck, a scholar from the cold lands of Sweden. He was a man of reason and vision, but also of pride, a true son of his age. To him it was unthinkable that the cradle of civilization could belong to Greece or Egypt alone. As he studied the old Norse sagas and the landscapes of his homeland, a thought began to bloom in his mind like fire under ice. What if Sweden itself was Atlantis? Rudbeck saw signs everywhere: the wide rivers, the fertile plains, the ancient burial mounds, all he claimed matched Plato's descriptions. The bright northern summer nights, glowing with a light that never truly faded, seemed to him the echo of a divine age before the flood. In his grand work Atlantica, he wrote with conviction that the lost island had not sunk at all. It had simply shifted northward in the world's imagination, hiding in plain sight beneath the snows of Scandinavia. It was a bold idea, and Europe listened half amused, half entranced. For though scholars debated his claims, they could not deny the deeper truth beneath them. Every culture wanted to believe it was descended from something extraordinary. The myth of Atlantis had become a mirror, and in that mirror each nation saw itself reflected. Across the continent, others followed Rudbeck's example. In Spain, in France, in the British Isles, scholars scoured their lands for clues. Some said Atlantis had been the Canary Islands, their volcanic peaks, the last remnants of the sunken realm. Others pointed to the Azores, to Madeira, or even to the deserts of North Africa. And still others insisted it had been Ireland or the shores of Morocco, or even the vanished lands beneath the ice of Antarctica. Each claim was different, but beneath the surface they all shared the same pulse, a yearning to belong to the origin of all things. Atlantis had become more than a lost city. It was the symbol of the human desire to locate perfection somewhere, anywhere in our past. As I imagine these thinkers hunched over their parchment maps, tracing coastlines with trembling fingers, I can almost hear the rhythm of their hearts echoing the waves that had once carried explorers across the sea. They were explorers too, though their ships were made of thought. They sailed through myths instead of storms, guided by stars not in the sky, but in the mind. Rudbeck's theories soon spread beyond Sweden. In Holland and Germany, philosophers debated him. In England, poets turned his ideas into verse. Even those who disagreed with him felt the pull of his conviction. For what he truly discovered was not Atlantis itself, but the truth that humanity cannot bear to live without wonder. The myth persisted precisely because it filled a void, the need to believe that our world once shimmered with divine order. I sometimes picture Rudbeck walking through the snowy streets of Uppsala at night. The air is sharp with frost. The stars burn like fragments of heaven. He pauses, breath clouding the air, and looks up at the northern lights rippling across the sky. To him, they are not mere lights. They are the aurora of memory, the faint glow of Atlantis shining still beyond the veil of time. The world around him was changing fast. Science was rising. Telescopes were aimed at the heavens, microscopes at the unseen. Yet even as reason grew sharper, the dream of Atlantis refused to fade. It flowed through the age of enlightenment like an undercurrent, silent but strong. Because no matter how precise human knowledge became, there was always something unreachable, a shimmer on the horizon, a feeling that the story of humanity began somewhere more luminous than fact could capture. And so from Sweden to Spain, from Iceland to the Mediterranean, the legend continued to evolve. Some imagined Atlantis as a continent that once connected the old world and the new. Others saw it as a divine metaphor, a golden age of harmony before human corruption. And still others began to believe that the lost island was not a place at all, but a stage of consciousness, a memory of the soul's own perfection. The beauty of the legend was that it belonged to everyone. Each scholar, each poet, each wanderer contributed a piece of their own heart to it. And though their maps contradicted one another, the emotion was the same, a yearning for origin, a longing to recover what had been lost, not in geography, but in spirit. Perhaps that is why the search never truly ended. For Atlantis in every age adapts to the dreamers who seek it. To the philosophers, it is wisdom. To the explorers, it is glory. To the poets, it is beauty. And to the weary soul, it is home. As I sit now by the sea, listening to the waves whisper against the shore, I think of all those who searched before me. Their names may be forgotten, but their longing remains the same longing that still moves in the tide tonight. The stars shimmer above, cold and patient, the same stars that once watched over Rudbeck's snow and Columbus's sails. They seem to whisper that every search, no matter how misguided, brings us closer to understanding ourselves. For perhaps Atlantis was never meant to be found in one place, but in the endless motion of seeking in the faith that somewhere beneath the waters of time, perfection still sleeps. And so the tide rolls on, and with it, the human heart. Tomorrow the search will begin again, this time in the age of enlightenment, where reason will try to silence myth. But the ocean, as always, will have the last word. The northern lights faded from the sky, their green fire dissolving into the long hush of dawn. The dreamers of Europe, Rudbeck and the poets and the countless seekers of a lost perfection, had cast their nets wide across land and sea. But the new century brought a different kind of light, colder and sharper. Reason had begun to rise like the morning sun, washing away shadows, demanding proof instead of poetry. And yet, as it did, the story of Atlantis refused to vanish. It lingered, trembling in that narrow space between imagination and truth, waiting to be questioned by the men who no longer dreamed, but measured. The world had grown brighter, but not warmer. It was the 18th century now, the century of calculation, of order, of discovery, stripped of mystery. Europe stood in the glow of enlightenment. Telescopes reached into the heavens, microscopes peered into the invisible, and philosophers believed that with enough thought, every secret could be named. Yet among all the revelations of that new age, one truth remained unchanged. Mankind still longed for Atlantis. In the candlelit salons of Paris and the libraries of London, the name still appeared, half a myth, half a riddle. Scholars gathered around polished tables, surrounded by maps and manuscripts, speaking with precision and skepticism. To them, Atlantis was a fine story, yes, but a story only. The world, they argued, needed no lost continent to explain its wonders. It needed only reason. Voltaire, ever the wit, laughed at those who still searched for Plato's island. If Atlantis existed, he said with a smirk, we would have already conquered it. His words carried the pride of an age that had placed man at the center of all things. The old awe that once trembled before mystery was now replaced by the certainty of intellect. But even in that age of disbelief, the legend refused to die. For every skeptic, there was a dreamer who could not accept that such beauty could be invented from nothing. The mathematician Jean-Sylvain Bailly suggested that Atlantis might have been the cradle of all human civilization, located somewhere in the far north, perhaps near the Arctic Circle. To him, the story was not false. It was distorted, filtered through the ages like sunlight through deep water. His opponents ridiculed him, yet his words struck a quiet chord. He spoke of memory buried in myth, of truth hidden in poetry. In an era that demanded facts, he dared to suggest that myth itself was a kind of evidence, one that spoke not to the intellect, but to the heart. Elsewhere in England, new explorers turned their gaze once again toward the sea. The discovery of ancient fossils and shells high in mountain ranges rekindled whispers of great floods and vanished lands. Was it so impossible, they wondered, that the ocean had once swallowed a world? The line between science and faith blurred, and even the most rational minds felt the soft tug of wonder beneath the surface of their thoughts. It was as though humanity could not decide whether Atlantis belonged to the past or the future. Some saw it as a warning of pride undone, others as a promise of knowledge yet to come. In that tension between disbelief and desire, the story evolved again. I imagine a philosopher of that time, perhaps in a study filled with ticking clocks, and the smell of ink pausing in the middle of his calculations. Outside, rain taps against the window. He glances at the shelves lined with Plato, Aristotle, and the new thinkers of his age. Then, just for a moment, he closes his eyes. He sees in his mind the shining city, the canals, the towers rising into light. For that brief instant reason and dream meet in harmony. He opens his eyes again, writes another formula, and says nothing of the vision. But somewhere deep within him, Atlantis still glows. The Enlightenment, for all its brilliance, could not extinguish the ancient hunger for mystery. If anything, it sharpened it. The more humanity explained the world, the more it felt the emptiness of what could not be measured, the ache for what was lost beyond proof. Atlantis had become not just a myth, but a question. Could truth exist without wonder? That question echoed far beyond the drawing rooms of philosophers. It reached the poets who began to weave the myth once more into verses about human frailty and forgotten glory. It reached the painters who imagined cities drowned in light. It reached even the scientists who, in their quest to map the earth, sometimes stopped to marvel at its uncharted depths. As I think of that era, I can almost hear the conversations, the clinking of glasses, the low hum of debate. One voice insists, there is no Atlantis. It is a fable for children. Another counters softly, and yet, have we not all come from somewhere we can no longer see? Between them the candle flickers its flame, bending like a question mark. Outside, the streets of Europe grow brighter with invention. Printing presses, telescopes, ships built with mathematical precision. The world seems smaller now, more knowable. And yet, in that very knowing, something precious slips away. The men of reason had sought to illuminate the darkness, but in doing so they dimmed the stars of imagination. Still, the sea kept whispering. Its voice, eternal and patient, carried secrets that no microscope could reveal. The waves lapped against the coasts of Spain, the cliffs of Ireland, the frozen fjords of the north, and each tide seemed to murmur the same refrain. You have not found me yet, for the ocean remembers everything. It remembers Plato's pen, Rudbeck's snow, the sails of Columbus, and the silence of the monks. It remembers the laughter of skeptics and the prayers of dreamers. And when the wind is just right, it carries them all together, a chorus of longing that defies logic and time. By the century's end, the Enlightenment had changed the face of the world. Faith and reason had quarreled, art and science had danced, and humanity had grown more confident than ever. But beneath that confidence lingered a shadow, gentle yet persistent, the feeling that perhaps the greatest truths are the ones that refuse to be proven. And so, as the last candles of the 18th century burned low, the legend of Atlantis waited once more for someone to believe, not with charts or instruments, but with wonder. That believer would come soon carrying a book that would make the world fall in love with the lost island all over again. His name would be Ignatius Donnelly, and through his pen Atlantis would rise once more, this time in the light of modern dreams. When the candles of the Enlightenment finally dimmed, they left behind both brilliance and fatigue. Mankind had measured the stars, charted the seas, and dissected the mysteries of life, yet something essential had slipped through its fingers. The world had been explained, but not enchanted. And in that quiet hunger for wonder, the ancient story of Atlantis stirred again like a melody remembered in the stillness after a storm. The 19th century was rising, restless and romantic, and one man would soon give that sleeping legend a new heartbeat, one strong enough to echo across the world. In the year 1882, a curious book appeared in the United States. A book that would set imaginations ablaze from Boston to Berlin. Its author, Ignatius Loyola Donnelly, was not a scientist by profession, but a man of politics, philosophy, and boundless fascination. He was a dreamer in an age of machines, a believer in myth during the reign of logic. And his work, Atlantis, the antediluvian world, would make the forgotten island more real to the world than ever before. Donnelly wrote not as a skeptic, but as an evangelist of wonder. He believed with his whole heart that Atlantis had once been a true continent, a cradle of civilization whose memory survived in myths scattered across the earth. To him, the story Plato told was not allegory, but history. He saw in it the missing link that could explain everything: the origins of mankind, the parallels between ancient cultures, even the floods and cataclysms spoken of in sacred scripture. His words were vivid, persuasive, alive with conviction. Atlantis, he wrote, is the source of all our myths, our sciences, and our arts. It was the mother of nations. He wove together legends from Egypt, Babylon, the Americas, and beyond, tracing their roots back to one luminous origin. To read his pages was to feel as though the ocean itself were whispering truth into your ear. The 19th century was the perfect soil for such a vision. The world was expanding faster than ever: steamships, telegraphs, and trains connecting continents that had once felt infinite apart. Archaeology was revealing lost temples and forgotten languages. Darwin's theory of evolution had unsettled old beliefs, leaving people hungry for new origins. Donnelly's Atlantis arrived like a revelation, offering both science and myth, a bridge between reason and faith. Readers devoured it. Scholars debated it. Poets praised it. For a time, the idea that an ancient civilization had given birth to all others seemed almost irresistible. In parlors and classrooms, in lecture halls and church pews, the lost world of Atlantis became a living topic again. Donnelly's book sold thousands of copies and was translated into several languages. The legend had risen from the depths and found a home in the modern heart. But what made Donnelly's vision so captivating was not only his research, but his sincerity. He was no cynic chasing fame. He truly believed that through Atlantis, humanity could rediscover its spiritual unity. He imagined an age when the wisdom of that lost civilization, its harmony with nature, its mastery of energy, its moral strength could return to guide a weary world. Of course, not everyone agreed. Scientists called his evidence flimsy, his conclusions romantic, his enthusiasm naive. But Donnelly understood something they did not: that the purpose of stories is not merely to be proven, but to awaken. And awaken people he did. His book became a spark that ignited a new wave of exploration, both in the seas and in the soul. Soon, expeditions set out once more in search of physical traces. The Atlantic Ocean was scanned, its islands mapped and measured. Some believed the Azores were the peaks of the submerged continent. Others pointed to the Caribbean, where volcanic ridges and underwater plateaus hinted at a vanished land. Reports of ancient ruins beneath the waves, though unverified, filled newspapers and imaginations alike. Yet even as explorers chased physical evidence, something deeper was happening. Atlantis was becoming not just a location, but a symbol, a reflection of all humanity's hopes and fears. It stood for the eternal cycle of greatness and fall of knowledge gained and lost. It was the mirror in which every empire saw itself, magnificent, flawed, and temporary. I like to imagine Donnelly late at night sitting by lamplight in his Minnesota study. The wind howls outside, shaking the windows. On his desk are open books, maps, and sketches of imagined continents. He dips his pen, writes a sentence, then pauses, hearing perhaps the faint rhythm of waves in the distance. Maybe he smiles, for in his heart, he believes he has heard something real, the voice of the past calling softly to the present. The world listened, and though scholars mocked him, millions believed. Even those who doubted felt the allure of his dream. Because Donnelly's Atlantis was not just about the past, it was about what could be regained. In an age obsessed with progress and invention, he reminded humanity that wisdom too could be rediscovered. As decades passed, his ideas seeped into every corner of culture. Writers, philosophers, and even occultists began to adopt them. The legend grew grander, more mystical. Some saw Atlantis as a place of spiritual awakening, others as a civilization destroyed by its misuse of power, a reflection of humanity's own dangers in the industrial age. And perhaps that was the truest part of Donnelly's prophecy. For while he wrote of a lost island, he was really writing about us, about our hunger to rise, our blindness to hubris, our endless longing for redemption. In that sense, his Atlantis never sank. It became the world itself, beautiful, wounded, and searching for its light. By the end of the century, Donnelly's book had become more than a bestseller. It was a bridge between ancient myth and modern yearning, between the rational and the mystical. Its influence would ripple far beyond his lifetime, reaching poets, philosophers, and dreamers for generations to come. Outside, the industrial cities glowed with electric light, and locomotives thundered across the dark plains. But in quiet rooms, readers still turned the pages of Atlantis, the antediluvian world, imagining a lost realm of peace and power beneath the restless sea. And as the century closed, humanity stood once more between wonder and warning. For every invention that illuminated the world, there was the shadow of misuse, of arrogance, and loss. Donnelly's Atlantis had become both hope and caution, a song that whispered, "Remember what we once were, and what we must not become." The waves continued their eternal rhythm outside his window, patient and knowing. They had seen civilizations rise and fall, faith flicker and return. And in their ceaseless motion, one could almost hear them repeating the same gentle truth that nothing beautiful is ever truly lost. It only waits to be remembered. When Ignatius Donnelly's pen fell silent, the world of the 19th century was no longer the same. He had breathed life into the legend once more, and Atlantis, like a sleeping god, stirred in the minds of millions. Yet as the new century dawned, the world's gaze began to drift from history to the unseen, beyond the sea, beyond the earth, into the invisible realms of the soul. Science and mysticism progress, and prophecy now walked side by side. And in that strange twilight between reason and revelation, Atlantis rose again, not as a continent, but as a spiritual truth waiting to be rediscovered. The 20th century arrived like a trembling dawn, radiant with invention, yet shadowed by unease. Electricity hummed through the cities, machines conquered distance, and humanity stood taller than ever before. But as the material world expanded, so too did an invisible hunger, the need for meaning, for mystery, for the divine that no telescope could reveal. Atlantis, once thought to be a legend of geography, began to transform into something far more intimate, a map of the human spirit. It was Helena Petrovna Blavatsky, the enigmatic founder of the Theosophical Society, who carried the legend across the threshold of modern mysticism. In her massive dreamlike books, The Secret Doctrine and Isis Unveiled, she spoke of Atlantis not as a physical island, but as a vanished epoch in the evolution of the soul. To her, Atlantis had been home to an advanced race of beings, the fourth root race, whose downfall came not through war or weather, but through the corruption of their spiritual power. They were brilliant, she wrote, yet blind, wise yet arrogant, a civilization undone by its own knowledge. Through Blavatsky's vision, the story of Atlantis gained new dimensions. It became not just a tale of lost land, but a moral and metaphysical parable. Each of us, she claimed, carries an Atlantis within the memory of a higher self, long forgotten, a divine spark drowned beneath the ocean of our material desires. Her words flowed across continents, finding readers who felt deep within that they had known such a world before, that they were in some mysterious sense the survivors of that ancient light. In smoky parlors and candlelit lodges, seekers gathered to hear her disciples speak of the Atlantean age. They imagined luminous temples where sound itself was a form of energy, where crystals sang and minds could shape reality. They spoke of cataclysms, of floods that cleansed the world of karma, stretching across ages. And though scientists scoffed, something in her message resonated with the spirit of the time. The modern man, surrounded by iron and industry, longed for a wisdom that could heal the emptiness between progress and purpose. Blavatsky's ideas inspired a new lineage of dreamers. Writers and philosophers began to describe Atlantis as the birthplace of all sacred knowledge, a place where divine science and human morality once walked hand in hand. Some saw it as a vision of the future rather than the past, the world that might return if humanity remembered its spiritual nature. Others saw it as a warning, a mirror of our arrogance as we forged new technologies without understanding their consequences. And then came Edgar Cayce, the sleeping prophet of America. In the quiet of the 1920s and 30s, as the world reeled from wars and depression, Cayce closed his eyes and entered a trance, speaking in a calm, faraway voice of lives long gone. He told of souls who had lived in Atlantis before its fall, of their mastery over energies now lost, of their misuse that led to destruction. According to him, the people of Atlantis had discovered forces of light crystal energies that could power cities, heal the body, even bend time. But when pride overtook humility, those same forces shattered their world. He warned that humanity was walking the same path again. If we failed to balance progress with spirit, he said, the cycle would repeat. Yet in his gentle voice, there was always hope. He spoke of a new awakening, that parts of Atlantis would rise once more, not from the ocean, but from within us. He believed the wisdom of that lost age would return, when humankind learned again to see the divine in all things. Whether one believed him or not, Cayce's words touched something deep. People wrote to him from every corner of the world, asking if they too had lived in Atlantis, if their fascination with the sea and the stars was a memory rather than a dream. And so, through his trances, Atlantis became personal, a story of reincarnation, of spiritual inheritance, of the long, slow journey of the soul toward remembrance. By mid-century, the legend had crossed into new realms of imagination. Novelists, artists, and mystics wove its symbols into their work, the sunken city as metaphor for the subconscious mind, the flood as the cleansing of memory, the shining temples as the higher thoughts that rise and fall within us. Atlantis had ceased to be an external place. It had become a mirror, one that reflected both the glory and the fragility of the human heart. And isn't that what all great myths do? They begin as distant landscapes and end as reflections in our own souls. Perhaps that is why Atlantis endures while so many stories fade. It is not bound to time or place, but to the rhythm of our becoming. We build, we rise, we fall, and then through some quiet miracle we remember. As I sit by the sea tonight, I imagine those lost Atlanteans not as vanished beings, but as whispers of who we are still becoming. I can almost hear their voices in the wind, soft, patient, filled with warning and hope. They speak not of power or pride, but of balance, of harmony with the world. They remind us that every discovery must serve love, that every light must carry humility. The tide pulls gently at the shore, tracing the same patterns it has drawn since the dawn of time. Above the stars shimmer the same stars that shone over Plato's Athens, over Donnelly's study, over Blavatsky's visions, and beneath them, the ocean glows faintly as if remembering. Perhaps that is Atlantis now, not beneath the waves, but within the heart of humanity, waiting for us to awaken once more. And as the sea whispers against the sand, its voice sounds less like a legend and more like a prayer. Remember and rise again. The dream of Atlantis had drifted once more through the tides of human thought, no longer as stone and metal, but as light within the soul. Helena Blavatsky had woven its mystery into the fabric of mysticism, and Edgar Cayce had given it a human voice, whispering across the silence between ages. Yet even as the 20th century advanced, the world sought proof once again. Men turned not to visions, but to machines sending ships and divers into the deep. The age of reason had returned, but this time it was tinged with longing. For what if the sea itself still held an answer? The ocean has always been a mirror of the human heart, vast, unpredictable, and full of secrets. By the middle of the 20th century, those secrets called out louder than ever. The myth of Atlantis had survived the storms of skepticism, the rise of science, and the fading of faith. It had become a question that refused to sink. And so humanity, armed now with submarines and sonar, set out to chase the reflection of its own forgotten past. It began in quiet laboratories and aboard research vessels that rocked gently on the Atlantic swells. Scientists mapped the seabed with new precision, their instruments sending sound waves deep into the dark. The results revealed mountain ranges beneath the water, plateaus and trenches, even long ridges that stretched like scars across the ocean floor. Every new contour stirred old hopes. Could these submerged landscapes be the bones of Plato's island? In 1948, explorers near the Azores reported strange structures rising from the deep walls. Pavements, formations too geometric to be natural. Newspapers around the world seized the story. Headlines shouted, "Atlantis found," a question that by then had been asked for centuries but never truly answered. For a moment, the world held its breath. But the excitement faded, as geologists concluded that the formations were volcanic, sculpted by time and pressure rather than human hands. Still, the whisper remained. The ocean, after all, never reveals all its truths at once. The search continued. Expeditions ventured to the Caribbean, to the Mediterranean, even to the icy edges of Antarctica. Everywhere, echoes of the myth appeared: mysterious stone roads off Bimini, sunken terraces near Santorini, submerged ruins near Japan's Yonaguni coast. Each discovery rekindled the dream. The question was no longer whether Atlantis had existed, but whether we would ever stop needing it to. Through all this, the voice of Edgar Cayce lingered like a guiding current. Decades before sonar could scan the depths, he had spoken of records of Atlantis, buried beneath the sands of Egypt, near the paws of the Sphinx, and under the waters of Bimini. To him, these were not mere relics, but memories preserved for a future age, an age that would rediscover both the wisdom and the warning of the lost world. When divers found strange underwater stone formations near Bimini in 1968, his followers felt vindicated. The prophecy is unfolding, they said. Scientists called it coincidence, an illusion of nature. But to those who believed, the stones were proof that the sea still remembered. Cayce's voice, recorded and replayed through the years, carried a calm conviction that transcended time. He spoke of reincarnation, of souls who had once lived in Atlantis returning to the modern world. They were drawn, he said, to technology, to healing, to the study of light echoes of what they had once known. The past, he murmured in trance, is never truly past. Perhaps that is why so many felt the legend awakening in their own lives. In an age of nuclear discovery, when humanity held the power to destroy itself. Cayce's words sounded like a mirror of conscience. The Atlanteans, he said, had fallen through pride, through their misuse of energy that could both create and annihilate. And now, he warned gently, we stood at the same precipice. The world listened, half in fear, half in recognition. In the years that followed, the myth grew not weaker, but wiser. Scholars studied ancient flood myths anew, noting their uncanny similarities across continents. The scientific community, though cautious, began to entertain the possibility of global cataclysms, of civilizations erased by rising seas long before recorded history. Plato's story, once dismissed as fantasy, began to seem less impossible. And still, the legend reached deeper than the ocean floor. It touched the inner landscape of the human heart. For the story of Atlantis had always been about more than geography. It was about memory, the memory of who we are when we forget the divine within us. Cayce's vision, whether literal or symbolic, spoke to that truth. Atlantis will rise again, he said, not as land, but as consciousness. As I sit by the sea, I can almost hear what he meant. The waves whisper softly against the rocks, steady as breath. The horizon glows faintly under the moonlight, and the water's surface seems to shimmer with possibility. Somewhere beneath those waves lie centuries of sediment, forgotten ships, and perhaps a few fragments of dreams. But the true Atlantis, the one that endures, lies above the water in the restless imagination of humankind. Maybe we keep searching the ocean because it reminds us of ourselves, beautiful, dangerous, full of hidden depths. We dive into it hoping to find proof of the past, but what we find instead is reflection. And when the diver surfaces gasping for air, he carries not stones or relics, but awe. A reminder that some mysteries are meant not to be solved, but to be honored. Casey's voice fades now into the same stillness that once surrounded Plato, Blavatsky, and Donnelly before him. The names change, but the longing remains, the need to believe that somewhere beyond or within there exists a place of perfect balance between wisdom and power. The ocean exhales again, its waves folding gently upon the shore. Above it, the stars shimmer like ancient eyes watching our endless search with quiet compassion. And in that cosmic stillness, the sea seems to say, "You are looking in the right place, but not deep enough." Perhaps the time has come to listen differently, to understand that the true ruins of Atlantis may not lie beneath the sea, but in the forgotten chambers of our own soul, waiting for rediscovery. The night deepens, and the waves roll on. Tomorrow the story will rise again, not from the depths, but from the sky, where myths and faith intertwine once more, in the eternal dance between mystery and meaning. The waves that once carried explorers and dreamers now carried instruments of science. The divers who descended into the deep no longer prayed for visions. They searched for data, for images carved by light instead of imagination. Yet even as technology advanced, the ocean kept its silence. No sonar, no satellite, no submersible could find the city that haunted humanity's heart. And so the question began to change. If the sea refused to yield Atlantis, perhaps the answer was not under the water at all, but in what we were meant to learn from the searching itself. By the middle of the 20th century, the world had mapped nearly every coastline, measured every current, and photographed the farthest depths of the ocean floor. The myths that once shimmered at the edges of the map had given way to facts. Yet one name, Atlantis, still lingered, floating like a phantom just beyond certainty. Scientists had dived deeper than any philosopher could have imagined. But the city of Plato remained hidden, elusive as the line between dream and memory. The ocean, for all its vastness, had become a laboratory. Submarines slipped through its darkness like patient beasts of metal. Sonar swept its plains with echoes that returned not temples but tectonics, not palaces but patterns of volcanic birth and death. What Plato had once called divine punishment, geologists now called plate movement. The earth was alive, shifting and swallowing and remaking itself. In that truth, some thought they had finally solved the riddle. Atlantis, they said, was not a myth at all, but a memory of real catastrophes, volcanoes, earthquakes, floods that reshaped the ancient world. Among these possible catastrophes, one place stood out like a scar still fresh in the Earth's memory. Santorini, the jewel of the Aegean. Thousands of years ago, the island had been torn apart by an eruption so vast, it erased entire cities and sent shockwaves across the sea. The ruins uncovered there at a site called Akrotiri revealed frescoes of dolphins and golden rooms frozen in ash. To many archaeologists, it was the perfect fit. Here at last was a civilization of art and splendor, destroyed in a single day and night. Perhaps this was Plato's inspiration, the story of Thera retold and magnified until it became myth. But others refused to let the mystery end so neatly. If Atlantis was only Santorini, they asked, Why does the heart still long for it? Science could measure the explosion, the ashes, the age of the stones, but not the ache of the legend. For Atlantis was never only about destruction. It was about the fall of something divine within humanity itself. As research continued, new theories surfaced like bubbles from the deep. Some pointed to the Black Sea, where a catastrophic flood might have inspired the ancient tales of drowning worlds. Others spoke of the lost lands of Doggerland beneath the North Sea, where people once walked between England and Europe before the waters rose. In every theory there was both truth and yearning, a blend of evidence and echo. Each discovery brought clarity, but never closure. And perhaps that is why the legend endured, even in the age of satellites. Each time science reached a conclusion, imagination quietly reopened the question. For while data satisfied the mind, it could not quiet the soul. The scientists might chart the seabed, but the poets still heard whispers in the waves. Late in the 20th century, the ocean offered another kind of revelation. The technology of sonar revealed vast, unexplored landscapes beneath the Atlantic ridges, trenches, and plains that stretched for thousands of miles. The mid-Atlantic ridge, once dismissed as a mythic boundary, now proved to be real, a mountain chain dividing the ocean floor. Some claimed it was proof that continents had once drifted apart, that there might long ago have been a single world now fractured by time. The theory of plate tectonics, elegant and irrefutable, explained much, yet it also rekindled an ancient hope. If the Earth could move and reshape itself so completely, who could say what had once stood above the waves? The deeper scientists looked, the more the ocean seemed to mirror them back. It was not simply a graveyard of lost lands, but a reminder that the world itself is always changing, that nothing stays buried forever. And so the myth of Atlantis evolved once again. It became a symbol not of lost geography, but of transformation, of rebirth. Civilizations rise, collapse, and rise again. Continents drift, vanish, and reform. The same story told in water is written too in the heart of humankind. I think often of those explorers sitting in steel submarines far below the light. They look out through small glass windows into a darkness older than time. The beams of their lamps touch the seafloor, fields of coral, forests of stone, the slow breath of the earth. There are no columns, no statues, no sunken towers. Yet there is wonder still. For in that quiet world untouched by centuries of myth, they see something greater than discovery. They see endurance. The ocean keeps its secrets, but it keeps its beauty too. Science, in its precision, did not destroy Atlantis. It gave it new meaning. It showed that even without proof, some stories endure, because they speak to something deeper than evidence, the longing to connect, to understand where we came from and what we are becoming. Atlantis may not have left ruins, but it left an idea that the past, no matter how lost, still shapes the present, like unseen currents beneath the waves. And so, as the century turned once more, the myth and the method finally met. The ocean no longer needed to yield a city to justify the dream. It had already done something far greater. It had taught us humility. For every time we think we know the world, the sea reminds us of what we do not. The waves whisper this lesson even now. Listen closely and you can hear it, the same rhythm that guided Plato's thoughts, that echoed through Donnelly's pages. that murmured in Casey's trance. It says that truth is not a fixed shore but a tide, forever moving between what is known and what is felt. Tonight, as the moon casts its pale path across the sea, I imagine that somewhere beneath those waves the ocean smiles. It has guarded its secret for millennia, not out of malice but out of mercy. For perhaps Atlantis is not meant to be found, only remembered just enough to remind us of who we are when we reach too high and forget to bow to the mystery that holds us. The tide recedes soft and silver, and the night deepens into silence. Tomorrow the story will rise again, not as a search through water, but as a reflection in art, in song, and in the quiet wonder that no discovery can ever erase. Science had spoken, and the sea had remained silent. The instruments had scanned its depths. The charts had been drawn, and yet Atlantis remained elusive, like a melody that could be heard but never played. But the absence of proof did not end the dream. It only changed its shape. When the divers returned empty-handed, artists, poets, and storytellers picked up the search. The lost city rose again, not in coral or stone, but in imagination, shining brighter than ever in the mind of humankind. It is one of the small miracles of our species that when we cannot find truth, we begin to paint it. As the 20th century unfolded, the dream of Atlantis slipped effortlessly from the hands of scientists into those of artists and visionaries. The modern world, restless and weary from progress, began to see itself reflected in the legend, a civilization powerful, proud, and fragile. And so Atlantis rose again, not from the ocean floor, but from the page, the canvas, the stage, and the screen. Writers were the first to bring it back. Jules Verne, the prophet of science fiction, had already hinted at the myth in his vast undersea imagination. In the 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, Captain Nemo steers the Nautilus through a drowned world, passing over what might be the ruins of Atlantis. The tone is hushed, reverent. "There lies the graveyard of an empire," Nemo whispers, "and the silence of eternity reigns there." It was not proof, but poetry, and for readers, it was enough. The sea had given them mystery again. Soon, others followed. Poets saw in Atlantis a mirror of their age, its ambitions, its arrogance, its inevitable decline. B. Yeats, haunted by visions of lost worlds and eternal returns, wrote of a civilization beautiful as the morning of the world, now buried beneath its own brilliance. In their verses, Atlantis became the symbol of what humanity gains through genius and loses through pride. It was both paradise and warning, a mirror polished by history's tears. Painters too began to dream of it. They filled canvases with impossible cities, towers of crystal golden bridges, spanning oceans, domes glowing with the light of an eternal sun. The architecture was at once ancient and futuristic, a strange harmony between myth and machine. The image of Atlantis became a way of imagining perfection, what the world might be if wisdom ruled power. But behind every gleaming horizon lay a tremor, the shadow of collapse. Always there was the sense that such beauty could not last. Then came the music. Composers like Debussy, and later film scorers of the 20th century, translated the legend into sound, slow, shimmering crescendos that rose and fell like waves. The melodies carried both longing and loss, echoing the rhythm of the sea itself. When people listened, they did not hear a story of history but of emotion, the sound of remembering something they had never known, yet somehow missed. Cinema would soon carry the legend even farther. From the early silent films to the great animations of the modern era, Atlantis became a stage for wonder. In Disney's Atlantis, The Lost Empire, the city glowed not as ruin, but as revelation, a civilization of energy and light, preserved beneath the sea, waiting to be awakened by compassion and courage. Audiences watched spellbound as the ancient dream came to life in color and motion. Children left theaters not questioning if Atlantis was real, but hoping it was. Through art, the myth of Atlantis achieved what centuries of science could not. It became timeless. It no longer needed coordinates or evidence because it lived within the collective imagination. Every retelling gave it new form, new purpose. Some artists painted it as heaven, others as warning, but all spoke to the same truth that Atlantis is the story of us, the builders, the dreamers, the destroyers, the ones forever reaching toward the divine and falling back into the sea. Even in modern literature, Atlantis continues to whisper. It appears in fantasy and science fiction in quiet literary metaphors. It is the lost homeland of memory, the archetype of the perfect world undone. Carl Jung once wrote that myths are the collective dreams of humanity, and perhaps none captures that dream so clearly as Atlantis. It is the vision of perfection that haunts us precisely because we know we can never hold it for long. I often think of how the legend travels from Plato's pen to Donnelly's book, from Blavatsky's teachings to the silver screen. It is a current running through history, shaping and reshaping itself with each age. The ancient philosophers sought wisdom in it. The mystics sought truth. The artists found beauty. And all of them in their own way touched the same hidden longing to reconcile the mind's clarity with the soul's yearning for paradise. Perhaps that is why the story feels so alive. It changes as we change. To a child it is a mystery, to a philosopher a lesson, to an artist a dream. It is both the echo of a world that might have been, and the prophecy of a world still possible. And through it we are reminded that even our failures are divine, for they are born of our reach toward the stars. If you stand by the ocean long enough, you can see how art and nature speak the same language. The sea is a canvas that erases and redraws itself with every tide. The horizon, that perfect line between sky and water, is a brushstroke of eternal imagination. And there beneath the rolling waves we place our dreams, each generation painting its own version of Atlantis upon the moving surface of time. The legend endures because it touches the one truth no science can measure: the capacity of the human heart to hope. We know the city is gone and still we search. We know it is myth and still we believe. We know it lies somewhere beyond the map, and still we look to the sea, as if it might one day return. The night grows calm now. The moon lays a path of silver across the water, and for a moment the waves look like marble carved by invisible hands. I imagine that if I followed that light far enough, I might find a shore where the air hums softly, where towers rise from coral, and the stars themselves bow low to touch their reflection. Perhaps that is Atlantis, not a place, but a promise, shimmering just beyond reach. And so the dream lives on, not buried, not broken, but reborn in every soul that dares to wonder. The ocean does not forget, and neither do we. Tomorrow we will follow that silver path once more, this time toward the mysteries within the human mind itself, where the myth of Atlantis becomes a mirror of consciousness reflecting not the world we lost, but the one we are still becoming. The dream had taken on new life. Through the hands of artists, poets, and dreamers, Atlantis had risen not from the sea, but from imagination itself. It had become a reflection of what humanity could be: wise, radiant, united, and a warning of what it too often becomes: proud, divided, undone. But even as it shimmered in paint, music, and cinema, the legend began to take on yet another form. The search turned inward, away from the ocean and into the deep waters of the human mind. If Atlantis was a mirror, what did it say about the soul that created it? By the late 20th century, Atlantis had drifted beyond history and myth. It became something psychological, an inner geography. A map drawn not on the ocean floor, but on the tides of consciousness. Thinkers, mystics, and even psychologists began to see the legend not as a lost civilization, but as a symbol of the human condition itself. The more we searched the external world for Atlantis, the more we seemed to glimpse it in our own reflection. Carl Gustav Jung, the great explorer of the human psyche, would have understood this perfectly. He wrote that myths are not stories from the past, but living expressions of the collective unconscious symbols through which humanity remembers itself. Atlantis, in that sense, was not a city of marble but of meaning. It represented the golden age that exists within every human being, the original wholeness before the flood of time separated us from our divine center. The sinking of Atlantis, then, was the loss of connection between spirit and matter, an inner cataclysm still replayed in the soul of each person who forgets who they are. When we read Plato's words today, they sound less like a tale of geography, and more like a parable of psychology. The Atlanteans, once virtuous and pure, become greedy and self-satisfied. Their pride severs them from the divine order, and in that separation, they collapse. Is that not the same pattern that unfolds within us? When the heart forgets humility, when the mind worships its own brilliance, when power becomes greater than compassion, then the soul, like Atlantis, begins to sink. It is in this way that the legend survives, not as proof to be found, but as wisdom to be remembered. The flood that swallowed the island is the same flood of chaos and forgetfulness that swallows our clarity when we lose our balance. And yet, beneath that flood, something still glows, the light of the city that was the memory of our higher nature waiting to rise again. In the modern age, this understanding found its way into art therapy and even philosophy. Writers like Joseph Campbell spoke of Atlantis as a mythic metaphor, a reminder of the eternal cycle of creation, fall, and renewal that governs all human life. He said that myths are the dreams of humanity, and that each person's task is to awaken within those dreams to find their own lost city within the self. In that view, Atlantis becomes a symbol of individuation, the journey from fragmentation to wholeness. To seek it is to seek oneself. Every time we descend into our own depths, facing the shadows of fear, pride, and loss, we are diving into our personal ocean. And when we emerge with wisdom, compassion, and renewed humility, it is as if a part of Atlantis has risen within us. I often think that perhaps Plato knew this all along. Perhaps his story was not meant to describe an event, but an inner truth. When he wrote of the sons of Poseidon, he may have been describing the dual nature of the human soul, half divine, half earthly, always struggling to unite both. When he wrote of the destruction that followed, he might have been warning not of floods and fire, but of the ruin that comes when we forget the sacred within us. Even in modern psychology, echoes of Atlantis appear. The subconscious mind is often compared to the sea, vast, mysterious, and filled with forgotten things. Beneath its surface lie memories, instincts, and dreams that shape us without our knowing. Like divers, we venture downward to recover what has been lost, to reclaim our own sunken continent. In that light, Atlantis is not an external mystery, but an inward map guiding us through the depths of human consciousness. The ocean then becomes both literal and symbolic. Its depths reflect the unknown parts of the self, and its tides mirror the rise and fall of emotion. Each wave that crashes against the shore is a reminder that what lies beneath the surface still calls to us, still asks to be understood. Perhaps this is why so many people feel peace by the sea. Its rhythm is the rhythm of the heart, its vastness, the echo of the mind. If you stand by the ocean at night, you can almost hear the truth hidden in its voice. It says that all of us are both the builders and the ruin of Atlantis. We are its pride and its fall, its memory and its rebirth. Within every human life lies a cycle of rising and sinking moments of clarity, followed by confusion, triumph followed by humility. Yet through it all, the current of grace moves quietly beneath, always ready to lift us again toward light. To believe in Atlantis now is not to search for a city lost to the sea, but to believe in the possibility of renewal. It is to trust that no matter how deeply we fall, something in us remembers how to rise. The myth tells us that even when the world seems drowned in its own mistakes, a fragment of the divine survives. And perhaps that is why the story has endured for so many centuries. It reminds us that what is lost is never truly gone, only waiting for rediscovery. As I listen to the waves tonight, I no longer think of Plato's island as a ruin or a riddle, but as a prayer. The ocean's whisper is not one of absence, but of return. Beneath the dark surface, something luminous stirs, a reflection of the world that once was, and the soul that still can be. And so the legend continues. It flows not through the maps of explorers or the arguments of scholars, but through the quiet chambers of the human heart. For the true Atlantis, the one we keep searching for, has always been within us, shimmering in the depths of memory, waiting to rise whenever we dare to look inward with courage, humility, and love. The night is calm now, the sea breathing slowly like a sleeping giant. In the stillness it seems to whisper once more, "The world you seek beneath the waves is already within you." And perhaps that is the secret Plato wanted us to remember, not where Atlantis was, but what it has always meant. The ocean within had spoken. No longer did we seek ruins beneath the waves, or proof carved in stone. Instead, we began to see Atlantis as a living mirror of ourselves, a symbol of the human journey from light to loss, and from loss to rediscovery. It had become clear that the story was never about geography, but about grace, how the soul remembers what the world forgets. Yet as the modern age advanced, humanity stood once more on the edge of its own creation. In the glowing circuits of technology, in the hunger for knowledge and control, the old question returned. Have we truly learned from the fall of Atlantis? Or are we building it again? There are moments in history when the past feels close enough to touch, when the echoes of ancient warnings ring softly beneath the noise of progress. The 21st century is one of those moments. We live surrounded by wonders that would have seemed divine to those who came before us, machines that think lights, that mimic stars, cities that gleam through the night, as if they too were made of orichalcum. Yet beneath the marvels, there is a familiar unease. The more we build, the more fragile it feels. It is as if the memory of Atlantis is stirring again, whispering through our circuits and screens, asking whether we are creating the same perfection that once drowned itself in pride. In every age, the story adapts. Plato's dialogue once served as a mirror for Athens. In our age, it becomes a reflection for the entire world. The Atlanteans rise through wisdom and fall through arrogance no longer belongs to myth. It feels like the pulse of modern civilization. We have learned to command nature, but not always to respect it. We have found ways to communicate across the globe, but often forget to truly listen. We hold the power to shape the future, yet tremble at the consequences of our own inventions. Like the ancient island, we stand at the height of our knowledge and at the edge of our humility. Perhaps this is why the legend endures not as nostalgia, but as prophecy. It returns to us not to frighten, but to remind. Atlantis is not a curse upon humanity. It is an invitation to awaken. Its lesson is written not in the stones of a lost city, but in the choices we make every day. The fall of Atlantis was not a single cataclysmic event. It was a slow forgetting of balance, a gradual blindness to the sacred rhythm between creation and restraint. That same rhythm, fragile yet eternal, beats within our own time. The world today glows with intelligence and innovation. Satellites trace the Earth's surface. Artificial minds write poetry. Human beings dream of colonizing other planets. And yet, in the quiet corners of the heart, there is still the same longing that once moved Plato to write, the longing to be whole, to remember a wisdom that transcends progress. It is the same longing that drives our fascination with Atlantis even now. For deep down we suspect that our civilization, like theirs, will not survive through power, but through humility. If you listen carefully, you can hear this truth reflected everywhere in the voices of scientists who warn of the rising seas, in artists who paint the cost of ambition, in philosophers who ask whether humanity's brilliance has outgrown its soul. Each voice in its own way echoes the same ancient plea: do not forget who you are. The myth of Atlantis has become a parable for the modern conscience, reminding us that wisdom without reverence is dangerous, and that progress without compassion is hollow. There is a kind of poetic symmetry in this. The story that began with a flood of destruction has returned as a flood of awareness. The waters that once symbolized loss now symbolize cleansing, a renewal of vision. The myth tells us that no civilization is ever truly lost if its memory becomes a lesson. Perhaps the true resurrection of Atlantis is not in the discovery of ruins beneath the sea, but in the rebirth of understanding within the human spirit. I sometimes imagine the ocean watching us from afar, patient and knowing. It has seen our lights flicker across the coasts, seen our towers rise higher each year. It has heard our promises to protect what remains of the earth, and our silence when we forget. It does not judge, it remembers. For the ocean has seen all our Atlantean ages, the glory, the pride, the fall, and the hope that follows. And it waits, as it always has, for us to learn that the sea within us and the sea around us are the same. Maybe that is why standing at the edge of the shore feels so sacred. We are drawn to the horizon not just for beauty, but for recognition. The waves mirror the rhythm of our breath. The tide moves like our thoughts, advancing and retreating, for still. In that moment between water and sky, we can almost believe that the world has not lost anything at all, that every sunken dream still glows beneath the surface, waiting to rise when the heart is ready. And perhaps that is what Atlantis truly is, not a place to be found, but a rhythm to be remembered. It is the pulse of wisdom through the centuries, the quiet reminder that power must bow to love and that knowledge must serve compassion. It is the eternal dialogue between creation and humility, repeating itself like the waves that never cease to kiss the shore. The modern world, for all its brilliance, still needs the myth. It needs it not as proof, but as poetry. For in its story lies the eternal pattern of human life. The rise toward greatness, the fall into error, the yearning for redemption. Atlantis is not the past we lost, but the future we are still shaping. It is both warning and promise, asking us to build not towers of pride, but temples of wisdom within the heart. As night falls over the sea, the horizon darkens to a deep blue, and the stars shimmer above like ancient eyes. I imagine Plato's ghost walking along the shore, listening to the same waves he once described. Perhaps he smiles softly, hearing how his story still lives. The ocean glows faintly beneath the moonlight, vast and forgiving. And in that gentle sound, the whisper of water over sand, one can almost hear the final truth of Atlantis, that every ending is only the beginning of remembrance. So let the waves carry this story onward, as they always have, from philosopher to poet, from dreamer to believer, from the past to the future. For the legend of Atlantis is not a story that ends. It is a tide that returns again and again with each generation that dares to look beyond the horizon and listen to the sea. And as you drift towards sleep tonight, let that sound guide you, the eternal breath of the ocean, the echo of lost wisdom, the promise that nothing beautiful ever truly vanishes. Atlantis is not gone. It waits in the quiet depths of your own heart, rising each time you remember who you are.